Welcome back to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. This is Bryan, recording this on Monday night with Colin and Pete, my two PGA guys. We just witnessed a great week of our weekend of PGA DFS, watching Henrik Stenson have the round of his life right after Phil Mickelson had quite a round at the beginning of the Open Championship over in Scotland. Henrik Stenson shot that last round 63 to take home the first place prize. I thought it was a great week of golf. It was very fun to break it down. I think a lot of the guys that we had talked about ended up doing well, so that's always encouraging. It was fun to watch that. Colin, please tell me that you watched some of it. I know that you're not a big guy on watching, but
I gave a token effort Thursday night because it was going on West Coast time. I couldn't figure out a stream login. I missed the entire weekend, so I'll take my donkey points as usual. Like, you guys can distribute them accordingly. I totally take that. That being said, congrats to Stenson, though. I was super jacked to see that he won. Stenson probably holds maybe the specialist place in my heart because he was a guy, like, when I first fired up my model and started playing PGA DFS, he was one that I thought was the most underrated in, like, the entirety of the top tier. I was on him forever. It's great to see him finally break through, so congrats to Stenson.
Yep. Big time congrats to Stenson. Makes sense that you didn't watch. If you're not going to watch that one, Colin, you're never going to watch. So it just solidifies kind of what we already knew.
I have my brand. I can't deviate from it.
No, that's for sure. And the thing I'm most proud of on our end is we all really went heavy on the weather angle on the Wednesday night live show. And it turned out that the morning, afternoon guys versus the afternoon morning guys were 2.77 strokes worse, which is absolutely massive, especially when you factor in the DraftKings scoring. The birdies were, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the birdies that the guys made on Friday morning were just exponentially higher than the guys in Friday afternoon. And the leaderboard was just stuffed with all those guys. So we nailed the weather angle, and even just on the models without factoring in the weather, I feel like we were all over the right guys. So I would say that was probably the best week of content that we've had in DFS, which I'm proud of. And yeah, right back in the swing of things, the good tournament, and then we have the PGA Championship. So it's definitely golf season in full mode.
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't kept up with the schedule, it is a little unique this year. We have the RBC Canadian Open this week, and then we jump right back into another major, the fourth major of the year, which is the PGA Championship. Usually takes place in August, but because of the Olympics that start at the beginning of August, they moved the tournament up to the end of July. So we have major, Canadian Open, major, which sort of I think is going to be a little interesting. We'll talk about how that affects players, especially ones playing this week, and how that might affect strategy and narratives and stuff. We'll get into that for sure because it is an interesting, have a non-major event sandwiched between those two for sure. Okay, so let's quickly touch, since last week was a big tournament on DraftKings and for us here, and just in general, what we learned. Colin, what sort of data points? I know you didn't watch it, so you didn't learn anything from watching, but was there any sort of data points that stood out to you that surprised you or helped you learn something?
I think it's more food for thought going forward. So when you have two just otherworldly performances like Stenson and Mickelson, there's always the question of hindsight. I don't think anybody saw that level of performance coming, but also trying to put it in context is its own challenge. What does it mean? Was there anything that we could have seen that was any kind of leading indicator? What does it mean going forward? And I'm kind of with that strong a performance, I'm almost wondering if it's too good and it skews essentially long-term averages, right? Simple average or something like long-term adjusted around does just fine over the long term, as a general rule. But I'm wondering if Stenson and Mickelson will maybe break some of our models in terms of just the round was too good. So It's an area of research that I haven't looked into enough. Do you essentially downgrade someone's results and kind of moderate, when you have extreme results, either good or bad? Is it maybe better to kind of regress them more towards the center, because that'll skew long-term averages? I don't know, but it has been a while since I saw that level of just one of these things is not like the others. In this case, two of these things, it's not like the others. So that's what I'm looking into going forward.
Yeah, Pete, what were your thoughts? I know that you said a lot of the guys that we were high on ended up playing really well, and we definitely nailed the weather thing. So I think we were pretty solid in our analysis, but was there anything that potentially we missed or just an affirmation of things perhaps that you learned last week?
I mean, golf is just, there's so much variance every week. You're making the best assumptions on things. You're relying on the data, you're relying on course fit, and you're hoping for a really strong angle. And last week, that was one of the biggest angles we've ever seen. And just watching it, I mean, guys out on Friday morning, they had reasonable conditions, and then by the afternoon, the wind was literally blowing sideways. Like, it was like the players were having trouble just like standing. Jordan Spieth said, I had to aim 70 yards left to target, just slap it out there and hope that the wind would just take it over into the fairway. So there's just so much guesswork done, and I felt really good about that. Just verified that we were right about that angle, and it's not going to be that way every time. That's the tough thing with golf, is you kind of have to wait and see with the weather and other angles that you want to take, and sometimes they'll be really powerful and sometimes they won't be, and that's kind of why it's a fun game too. But man, things really lined up well. It was looking like a great weekend for everybody. And I think a lot of the guys that we did point out did really well. JB Holmes is my biggest.
JB Holmes, he lived up to my expectations.
Yeah, I played him in one cash game team, but I did not in the Millionaire Maker for some reason. I was made a lot of my lineups on FantasyLabs, and because I wanted so much Stenson and Dustin Johnson and a variety of other guys, for some reason he just didn't end up in as many teams, even though I wanted him. That's my biggest regret, is not having enough JB Holmes. Fading Colin is just the worst. You gotta just ride and die with the Colin David place. So yeah, it was fun, and I was actually in Las Vegas for it too. So that was the interesting part, is you're already kind of in a weird, just a place for a sense of time, and then I wanted to sweat the PGA, of course. So I turned it on like 11, 12 o'clock in Vegas time, and I'd be in and out of sleeping / waking up to watch it, and it was an interesting tournament for sure.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to watch, definitely. And that's going to take us into something that I want to talk about. We're going to get into the RBC Canadian Open. We'll go over course fit and our plays for this week. But like normal, I like to give a strategy question, or just maybe an overarching question for the week to you guys, and have you guys discuss it for our listeners. And that's the thing that I'm having trouble with, is Stenson, honestly. On one hand, I do want to sort of pat ourselves on the back. He was such a great play in all of our models. Pete did his preview model, and he was like 10 points higher rated than any other player. Like, it's not like we weren't on him, but I also don't want to pat ourselves too much on the back, because then it's just, you sort of miss the fact that it wasn't a very sustainable performance, Colin. Like you said, it was just so historic. And this is a guy who, I mean, even though he had really high greens and regulation marks, and we knew he was an accuracy guy and would fit well with this course, what sort of was the crazy part about his rounds was not the fact that he was hitting greens, because he hit the regular percentage of greens that he had been. It was the fact that he was nailing every putt. He wasn't missing any birdie putts, which is not the sort of player that we've seen. So I would sort of just like to discuss putting. And Colin, I know this is something we discussed before, and Pete is big on putting and like that it's important. I think you agree that it's important, but maybe just think that it's less predictive. Is there anything that we can do better to not maybe foresee this historic performance, but just deal with putting and PGA DFS a little more?
Well, my stock line is you should treat putting like essentially like something like BABIP until proven otherwise. Whereas like some days you're going to have a BABIP of 700, and just like you're going to hit like every single one of your spots. Like, it's a similar thing with putting. Like, someday you will just make all your birdie putts. That's a very simplified understanding of how putting actually works, but I think it holds. I mean, I think that reflects reality more often than not. I feel like it's maybe a boring angle to say, like, all right, it's the good side of randomness, because you should always figure out, like, okay, what was it about putting that made this one so much better? Why was he in the zone? And I rack my brain a little bit to figure out, like, okay, what is different about that going forward? I think my conservative analysis essentially says, like, still treat putting as randomness and just don't weigh it going forward, because otherwise it'll skew stuff. So it's boring. I'm hoping maybe someone with a little bit more like subjective take can kind of point out where I'm wrong. Pete, what do you got for me?
I think you're right. I mean,
I was hoping for. All right, keep going.
There's no. I mean, Stenson, I've watched him putt a million times, and even the guys we're talking about, he normally struggles with those 5-6 footers. He's a decent lag putter, but the reason he's so competitive and one of the best golfers is he's just an elite ball striker. I mean, he's hitting 81% of greens in his short-term form coming in, and he just pured the ball, including a Sunday round where he made 10 birdies. He literally hit every single ball in the middle of the face. I mean, there are multiple shots that you would have loved watching Colin where he hit the ball and he kind of looks to the side, stares at his caddy, and you think he's disgusted because normally when golfers stop watching the ball, they're like pissed. The ball lands like 10 feet right next to the hole, like hole high. I mean, he was just puring every single iron, and just the sound it was making was incredible. But the thing that's just not sustainable at all, and that I don't think any of us will see coming ever again, was from Stenson, is just making bomb after bomb after bomb. He's not a great putter, and even the great putters aren't going to make putts like that. There's a ton of variance. Obviously, it's correlated with confidence. You start seeing the balls going. There has to be. I'm sure we looked into the data. Guys who are putting on a higher standard deviation, maybe that sustains more in a round. Again, that's a little bit subjective to say, but just seemed like Stenson was in the groove. He felt great about the greens, and he was putting everything really closer in. And that's not sustainable, but the ball striking certainly is, and he had everything work for him. He had a pretty emotional speech, which I thought was cool. He talked about how one of his close friends had just passed away, and he dedicated it to him. Again, super subjective, but you always like hearing stuff like that. And it just seemed like everything kind of came together from a perfect situation. And the other thing that's quantifiable is he got like literally the perfect side of the draw. So everything came together, and he had the historic round. That's the lowest score ever shot in a major, which is 264. Don't believe it's the lowest ever. I think people have shot more than 20 under in the majors. I'm not exactly sure, but for sure it was the lowest score. Again, the par was only 71, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think if you do the Z-score normalization, it's not like it was whistling straights at PGA last year where everybody's putting up like huge numbers. It was only Stenson and Mickelson, and the rest of them were struggling like the British Open course that we thought it would be, which just puts it even in greater context. So.
And they played together on the weekend too. Like that definitely. There's just so many things that we can't quantify, but it makes sense to me. Like they're playing together. They're both in the groove, and they just see each one of them just making shot after shot after shot. Their confidence is sky high, and they're competing. I mean, it's all, there's nothing quantifiable here, but it certainly was an outlier, and there's all these factors that say, okay, maybe there's a reason all this stuff happened. They had the weather, they were playing together, they each saw putts going in after in. Like, it was just a ridiculous circumstance, and certainly I don't think we'll see anything like that again, because that was by far the biggest discrepancy between the second-place golfer and the third-place golfer. I mean, it was
one thing you touched on real quick, and I forget if we've discussed this anymore. It's the angle of, do golfers play better when they're paired up with like good competition, that kind of feeding. Have we discussed that before? I forget.
No. I think we might have mentioned it, but we've never gone into detail.
Yeah, I think I saw some other study that says it's worth maybe about like a stroke per tournament, about like when you're paired up with other good guys, that there actually is something quantifiable about pairings can reinforce one another. That's an angle that I think is definitely worth exploring down the line. Do you use that as an angle, like when you're doing lineups at all?
For tournament lineups, it's something I just thought. It was just intuition. I stacked groups together.
Okay.
I did that this week too, where I stacked, the three guys together, and it just makes a lot of sense. I mean,
group stacking is I know we say there's no correlated outcomes in golf, but I think there is something to that with group stacking.
You get the weather correlation if it works out. Great.
Yeah, weather obviously I do believe that's correlated outcomes, but that's half and half. But group stacking, in a correlation within a group, I'm very open to that could be.
The subjective angle from just a golf standpoint is, when someone's playing bad, it can throw off your rhythm. Like, you're hitting a shot and then you have to wait a lot more for the golfer. When everyone's out there, and especially if guys are putting it close, oftentimes they're kind of aiming at the same targets. So one thing that absolutely would help is, and it happened a ton with Stenson and Mickelson, we saw, they're both aiming for the same spot in the green. They're both playing so well. They both put it in the same area of the green. Then one guy gets to watch the other guy putt it, which shows him the line, and then he putts right after him. So there's a ton of things that can work together. But I would be very interested to see more data on it, because it makes sense to me. And that's the other thing too. Just, I go out there and get some jelly beans on the line against my friend, and we're really close. And it does seem like our best rounds come together, and our bad rounds kind of come together too. So I certainly think there's merit to that. And there are some things that you can say, okay, that makes sense, like the rhythm of the golfer, and then obviously the putting, I think, is a huge key, especially if they're both kind of putting in the same area. You can get reads on the putts. That's a huge thing for the professional golfers.
For sure. Yeah, so a lot of this, I guess, will require a little more statistical analysis, and part of it is, I guess we could look into that, whether the pairings, you said it averaged, or it gave golfers like a stroke per round. I guess you would have to separate that from weather because of that correlation. And then another thing, Pete, you had mentioned that Stenson was just feeling confident, and that is correlated with good putting. But, how do you measure confidence? I don't know if you've ever looked at this, but have you seen if players putt better when they have a better course fit? Like if those are correlated more, like it's just a good course for them, so they're feeling confident, that they can get the ball close to the hole. And I don't know.
No, nothing like that. Again, I've just put so little into like trying to make putting predictive that it just seems like that's a very marginal gain. It's an interesting question, but I just can't imagine that like there's a whole lot of return on model accuracy for that type of study.
Yeah, the only thing I could see with putting is like really detailed analysis potentially on grass type, maybe being a slight edge. And then I do think that there are some, like, it would bear itself out anyway on like a league course history, which we've already, like a league course history we've defined as something that matters. And, you want an easy example like Spieth at the Masters, like his putting is just absolutely unreal. But I think it's really, really hard to predict putting. And the pros will talk about it too. And that's the thing as well. Like one of the reasons there's so much variance in putting as well is the guy can make a perfect putt and it can just hit like a off-bladed grass, like a little bit of lump. There's so many things that can go wrong with a putt. And these greens aren't exactly perfect every single time. So I think there's so much noise in it, and I think certainly it affects short-term results. You can't look too much into that, and that's why I think we did a good job with Stenson in particular. We could never predict the putting, but we knew he was coming in razor sharp with the ball striking.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought it was a worthwhile discussion to have, especially given the Stenson putting was sort of crazy. All right, so let's move into this week. We have the RBC Canadian Open, and we'll get into course. The course is Glen Abbey, which is in Ontario, Canada. Colin, what does your course fit say about Glen Abbey?
Definitely shakes out as an accuracy course. I think distance gets a moderate penalty. GIR definitely gets a boost, and then driving accuracy gets a small boost. So definitely shakes out like a ball striker's course. So Fiber Kuchers, your Furyks, your Colt Nosts, all the accuracy guys, which makes it interesting in the top of the leaderboard because those are more distance heavy guys. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, all else being equal, it's an accuracy course.
Gotcha. Pete, how much weight are you putting into course history this week? The Canadian Open is a tournament that rotates sites. It was played at Glen Abbey last year, but they did play it, or they did move it for a couple years, and it was last played in 2013, I believe. And then they changed the greens or resurfaced the greens. So does that make it where you can't put as much weight into course this week, or are you okay doing that?
I'm okay putting some into it, and that's kind of the question I'm trying to figure out. Obviously, we're recording this on Monday night. I'm definitely going to do more research on how much to weight course history and specifically what results I want to look at. But certainly something to take into consideration, and I definitely think we know it's an accuracy course.
So I think they said the greens were resurfaced. So they played here twice in the last 5 years, 13 and 15, right? And they resurfaced after 13. Is that correct? Yeah, so I took a look at essentially the key stats and ran course fit on before and after the resurfacing, and they came out almost identical. So I have no reason to believe from a data perspective that resurfacing changed anything fundamental about the course. Okay. So I'm going to give it my full normal weight because I haven't seen anything in the data to suggest that there's anything fundamentally different about Glen Abbey.
Okay, yeah. Definitely fair enough. We won't get into weather, even though it was such a big part of last week, just because it is Monday night and that's still a little far out. But definitely, monitor that as lineups lock approach on Thursday morning, for sure. Last question before we get into specific players, and we'll go through our tiers like normal. We just want to talk about the unique schedule that we had mentioned. We have a major, we have this, and then we have the next week's major. This field is actually pretty solid. It's headlined by the two top guys in the world in Jason Day and Dustin Johnson. But then the rest of the field is actually pretty strong too. We have guys that are really good PGA Tour golfers. So I don't know if there's any any narratives that you're going into this week, Pete? Are you treating the tournament any differently than you would with the fact that the PGA Championship was moved up and now we have this tournament sandwiched in between the two, or just proceed as normal?
I'm just going to proceed as normal and hope it works out. I mean, I honestly don't know how to kind of account for any subjective angle here. I think these guys are all going to play well. Prize pool here is pretty solid too. What I need to go back and look, but I think it's a pretty solid prize pool thing. So yeah, I'm going to take it. These guys obviously, I mean, they don't want to have a bad round right before a PGA. So I guess the one thing you can consider that might play a small factor with specific golfers is the withdrawal angle. But I need to do more research before I say, okay, I can't take this guy because there's more. He's more likely to withdraw than other guys, especially in this spot. But that'd be the only thing that I can think of that might change my analysis.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting uncharted territory because we've never had, like, in the history of golf, 2 majors essentially, like with 1 week.
3 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, so it's all kind of hypothetical, like how would everybody change their preparation? My assumption is also, like, don't change anything otherwise. Yeah, I think the withdrawal angle may be a little interesting, but like I have to believe that if something was truly bothering someone, they'd withdraw before. I mean, that's always my standard assumption.
I wish that was true. Freaking, we got waxed on Berger on that one. Daniel Berger.
Yeah, that's true. So,
yeah.
Well, no, he did withdraw before. What was it, the British? So he got at least
At least he did that, but he went out on the tournament before where we were on him and he hit one shot.
And,
yeah.
I kind of regret going so in on him, but not really at the same time.
Yeah, I same thing with Furyk last year at like, what was the last tournament, like the Coca-Cola or whatever one they have in Atlanta, where he withdrew.
Yeah.
It was a good play. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this narrative might be a little more important next week when we're talking about the PGA Championship. And then we'll have to talk about the guys who took the week off, and then as opposed to the ones who played in this tournament, the Canadian Open, and how they performed. So maybe not a huge storyline for this week, but maybe something we can talk about next week when we have all of our content for the last major. Okay. So let's jump into the players' salaries. I divided it up a little bit differently, just because the salary breakdowns were a little odd this week. So we'll start from the bottom and then go up to the top, because normally we have our 3 salary tiers with the top tier, but because Jason Day and DJ are such heavy favorites and they're just huge odds-on favorites over the fields, I wanted to put them in their own tiers so we could debate them last. So we'll do 4 tiers. So the first one we're going to discuss is guys who are 6'5" and under. So these are going to be the value bin guys. Colin, do you want to start with this one?
All right. It's actually strangely unfamiliar names this time, which is kind of a refreshing pace. I think favorite in the value bin is Kyle Stanley.
He's ranking so well for me.
Yeah, I think there's solid course history here. It's not a great fit, but and I'm looking
he's missed 5 of his last 8 cuts, dude.
Right. And so what do I see apparently in Kyle Stanley that is popping so hard?
Driving accuracy and green irregulation. He's been killing the recent green irregulation. 73%.
That's gotta be it. Greens. Yeah, I think, but the course fit isn't that bad. I think this is more of an overall. Yeah, I think this is just there's a lot of missed cuts here, but I think it's just I think you have to go back then further than his last 6 or something like that. I think there's just solidly long-term form in here that just isn't going away. So he's popping. Vijay Singh is interestingly popping pretty hard. I know you were semi on him last week, Pete, but I'm probably not going to play him.
Yeah, I got off him completely once the weather, but I thought he was an interesting play because he's been playing he's just going to crush the senior tour, Vijay Singh.
Oh, yeah, easily. Let's see. Who else is down here? The other names at the top of the list, Spencer Levine, Steve Wheatcroft, and Blaine Barber. I don't think I've ever rostered any of these guys all year. Zach Blair is also kind of barely makes the cut as far as the sub 6K crowd. And then it may be Patrick Rogers too, if he's kind of up there. But yeah, these are all it is a slightly weaker field of the bottom half, but man, this is kind of unfamiliar territory. My stock favorites are no longer there. I don't know, Pete, do you watch any of these guys? You probably know more about them than I do at this point.
Yeah, no, I know some of these guys. I was going to ask you about Stanley because he's actually, in the current model I have, he's ranked 4th behind Kuchar, Dustin Johnson, and Emiliano Grillo.
I think there's something there. Yeah.
There's really, really, really strong in the model here. And
Yeah.
it makes, looking at him, he's relatively accurate, and he's always been pretty good green and regulation guy. And then recently he's been very accurate hitting green.
His long-term floor is just really good. I mean, like look past like the slump that he's in, just like everything before that is gold. So if you believe in long-term averages.
Yeah, you look at his long-term adjusted round. That's the thing. So like he has great recent green and regulation, and then his long-term adjusted round isn't that bad. I don't know. He seems fine.
Yeah, it seems like a solid base for like a
6,100. Like, why not?
Yeah. Exactly.
So, Colin, I got a question for you, and this is something I actually wrote about today for an article at FantasyLabs. So my theory is that course fit is really important. I think we saw that with Stenson last week. You know, like it was an accuracy course, and he was the most accurate guy. And these guys that we're talking about right now are guys who are accurate, and these are guys we want to target. But my theory is that you have to be at a certain talent level for course fit to matter. Like you have to have some sort of talent threshold and then apply course fit. What are your thoughts on that?
That is a hot take. I don't know. I'm going to have to stew on that one. I would actually that's easy enough for me to test, and I'm going to say like it's plausible. I'm going to say I don't have an opinion one way or another on it because I can test it. So why bother to have an opinion when you can test the data instead? But I mean, obviously that's true. Like if that's true for like definitely for like a weekend hack like me who's happy to break 100. But like, does that really hold true at the elite level? I don't know. Maybe like that's my only devil's advocate case about like these guys are all card carrying professionals. I think like even if that's true, like philosophically, I think they all do have the base level of talent because they're on the tour, which is like it's tough to get that card. So.
Yeah, I guess just sort of researching it myself and applying course fit stuff is that a course fit just it matched up less when you get to these guys. And it was just like when you get to the bargain bin guys, it's all about talent. And then once you hit a certain talent threshold, as measured by this long-term adjusted round score is sort of how it's measuring talent. Once you get above a certain level, so you can sort of get like to tour average, then all of a sudden course fit matters a ton. But below that, it just doesn't matter really. I don't know, but I guess
no. That is it's a very interesting hypothesis to test. I will gladly look into that one. I'll probably just shamelessly steal it for an article down the road. So, but I got to finish up my masterpiece these next couple weeks.
Okay.
What's the masterpiece, buddy? Can you teach
It's the unified theory of like how to pick a cash game lineup and how to pick a GPP lineup. Put everything together, like floor, ceiling, projection, variance, like in like recent form, volume, just everything. And toss it all in a blender and just see what matters.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm very, very excited for that. Going to the golfers you mentioned, I was going to ask you about all the same guys. The only other people who are popping for me. That are even intriguing, I think, are Ogilvy has actually been hitting a decent amount of greens, been accurate. He's rated high on my model. Normally, not a guy that I take. And then Thomas Aiken is another guy who historically has hit a lot of greens and been very accurate. So if you want to play those two cards, I don't mind either one of those guys in that price range. I do have some nice picks going into the next range, though, if we're ready to transition there.
Yeah, of course. So the next range I have is 6'6" to 7'5". Is that the range you're thinking about, Pete?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, the first obvious one I think we're all going to be on is Colt Knost.
Yeah.
Does that hits your range, right, Colin?
Absolutely.
And then my favorite play, which I've been waiting this whole time. I bet you actually might even pop in your model there, Colin. Matt Fitzpatrick back on the bandwagon. I got off him last week.
I hate this the least that I've ever hated Matthew Fitzpatrick. That is the most begrudging you're going to get. 6,800,
way cheap. 8K at the British Open, and now he's 6,800 here in a weaker field. I'm going to be on him. I mean, if you look at the stats, I mean, he's historic long-term, 72% of greens, 70% driving accuracy, 70.4, which is very, very strong. His recent form isn't as strong, but still a good green regulation, good driving accuracy player. I'm on Fitzpatrick this week. So those are two ones. I think Knost is going to be a really, really popular player. I really like him quite a bit. But Fitzpatrick, happy I get to bring him up. And I had 0 shares of him, just to let you know. I got completely off him.
Good. I did my job then. So Fitzpatrick, like I said, it's the least terrible that I've seen that. I mean, there's probably
cheap,
a lot more subjective that goes into that as far as like why you like him.
Real quick.
He's a very good course fit. I will give you that 100%.
One of my buddies who's really sharp with golf calls him a little bitch. So I told him I was paid to hear that on the podcast. He thought it was funny. But
perfect. All right. So who do I have at the top of mind? Daniel Summerhays continues to dominate the value tier. I think I've been on him for like the last 2 or 3 weeks, and all he's done is essentially like maintain that performance, if not like overachieve it. Like it wasn't a great British Open, but he made the cut and like posted a solid. And he's got by far the most pro trends in like this value bin. Like he hasn't missed a cut since March 20th.
You know his number one strength is putting. Is that intriguing you? That's the story, and I'm actually going to look that up real quick.
Okay. So I think he is definitely my favorite of that range. Nose is up there too. Ben Martin is making a surprise appearance here. I think he's always kind of skirted on the radar. And then the one I've been waiting for, like long back in the day, Chez Reavie, finally back in
I saved him for you.
On the strength of course history, I think he has the second best course, like adjusted course history essentially in the entire field.
He's won this, right?
Like, has he?
Yeah. He won a couple years ago.
Yeah,
like 5 years ago. So.
Was that? I don't know if that was this course or not. I mean, and that kind of gets into the same. What does he have? I don't think he's won at this particular course. Or no, he has. Oh wait, yeah.
Yeah.
It's outside of the window for that I consider course history. So like, but that still like counts for something, I'm sure.
It does for Chez, just him.
Yeah, absolutely. And then if you want to go the pure best course here, the random name that pops here, if you want to go pure course history play, is this guy Mark Wilson, who I don't think we've talked about him once. The name is not familiar in the slightest, but he has very good course history. Other than that, like I could see some other mainstays like Brian Harman and Chad Campbell. Isn't Harman Canadian too?
He might be.
I think he is.
Summerhays, by the way, is 18th on tour. Was 16th going to last week in strokes gained, which is that's elite. He's a top 10% putter.
Harman is not Canadian. He's from Georgia.
Who am I thinking of then? It's some other. Oh, David Hearn. That's who I'm thinking of. All right, that's not even that close. So all right, never mind. Either way, I like all those guys.
Like those calls. Now, lead us into the next year with Roberto Castro. I know even though his prices come up, I bet he still pops for you.
It's going to be a close decision. All right, Bryan, you got to give me a range here.
Yeah, so we're going all the way up 7-6 to just don't talk about Jason Day or DJ. We'll hold off on them. So 7-6 to 10-6, that 3K range.
Okay. All right. I mean, top of the list, I think, and is not too big a surprise, is Matt Kuchar, who like just continues. I mean, he's just I'll never fault him for plugging him in cash. Just like the best floor of probably anybody on tour. Other mainstays, Emiliano Grillo. I think this course sets up pretty nicely for him. He had a pretty. I mean, we always seem to talk about Grillo. I don't think he did. Words. Jim Furyk is actually I think he's finally shown enough that he's starting to creep back into there. I think 9,800 is a little bit expensive for him, but I wouldn't hate it at this point. But he's definitely showing something. And then actually, I will do a hot swap of Roberto Castro, who is good to be clear. I think he has a great course fit and pretty good history.
You're going to go to Streelman.
Good guess, but it's actually William McGirt. Who I think
course history, elite course history.
Yeah, so I think he is Dirt McGirt is probably my favorite. I mean, just the value is just by far, I think, the best in this price range. Nobody else under 8,000 comes close, except for maybe there you go, David Hearn, who I'm not even factoring in his Canadian or home country advantage. If you think that's an angle, do you think there's an angle here for home Canadian advantage?
Minor at most, maybe some.
I remember,
they grew up in the area. They grew up in the area, absolutely. The Euro angle is way easier to quantify, or at least way easier to get behind, because it's a different type of golf in general. Links golf versus traditional, versus not traditional, versus what a standard American course is much different. The target golf is totally different. Canada, I'm probably naive and missing something potentially, but I can't think of a reason why, outside of comfort and all that stuff, which I do put a little bit of value in. If they live if they play at the course consistently, they're a member, they live in the area, I'll give that value.
David Hearn did grow up in Ontario. Yeah, it is in Ontario.
All right, then I'm buying that angle.
All right, so yeah, I could buy a hot swap of McGirt or Hearn and give Hearn a slight boost, but I think Hearn could be that's a decent value play.
Hearn had back-to-back runner-up finishes in 12 and 13.
All right, and then who else we got? Yeah, Charlie Hoffman. I think I seem to mention every single week as far as he's still up there.
Yeah, you just named everyone. The only other guy who's popping for me is not a great course fit, but he's definitely way too cheap for his talent. Is Ryan Palmer? You have a take on him at all, Colin?
Yeah, no, he was the other one that I would have. I mean, I think he's the second best value actually. So yep. Other than I always seem to like Palmer, and I don't know. I feel like he has shades of JB Holmes of seem to always get the wrong side of him or something.
Yeah, JB Holmes just went ham. I guess one other guy can at least give a little bit of mention to. Maybe not. He missed last week. I did think that there was a chance that Robert Streb was turning the corner just a little bit from subjective stuff. He started to play a little bit better, but he's still just missing way too many cuts. And he missed both cuts in the majors. So
yeah, and on top of it, I mean, if there may be better times to pull the trigger on him. I think he does not have great course history or a good course fit for this one.
Fair enough. Yeah, you just named everyone. I really, really like Kuchar a ton. A pivot that's interesting if you don't want to play Kuchar for the same price, who definitely is going to be way lower owned, especially in higher stakes buy-ins, is Sneds. Mm-hmm. Snedeker does have good course history here relatively. I haven't looked too much into it, but he did have a win in 2013, which was the same course. So I think I think about him for that reason, but he's definitely a nice pick because I think Kuchar could be one of the heaviest owned players.
I think in cash though, you just it's that.
Oh, you played Kuchar all day. If you played Sneds over Kuchar in cash, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah, I agree.
Colin, I'm curious about Palmer because I was actually going to ask you about him as well. We had talked a little bit off air about what distance guys, what sort of penalty they get. You said a moderate penalty, and Palmer's a guy that does have some distance. So is that concerning to you and maybe some of these other top guys that do have a little bit of distance? I
mean, yeah, I'd say Palmer has a poor course fit for this as much as you can get. I put it as about relative to other course fits. It's still pretty moderate. I think it maybe 2% or so. I mean, that's what passes for a harsh course fit. But yeah, it is. It's probably why I'm not as high on him as someone like maybe McGirt or even Castro, who just rank better. I think he just gets.
Castro has a sick course fit.
Yeah, I agree.
His price has come up a lot, but that's the problem. Castro in our normal range, it'd be a beautiful. But one stat that I think is really predictive in this spot is he's been so accurate in his recent form. And Castro's already an accuracy guy, but coming in knowing that he's been great recently, that bears well for him in this spot, I think. But, yeah. Are
you higher on that after the Stenson stuff? Because if Stenson was crazy accurate coming into to last week.
I mean, Stenson was just ridiculous. He was hitting 81% of greens. Let's see. To give an example.
That's 78, though. I mean, he's not that crazy, but.
78. I'm not seeing that.
78%.
77 accuracy, which 77.7. That is really, really high. I think that's the highest of anyone. Actually, KJ Choi has been more accurate than him off the tee. But, super high driving accuracy, which I definitely weight. And his green and regulation is good. Give an example, though. The next highest green and regulation in short term is Vegas at 74.3%. Barnes, and then our boy who we talked about earlier, Kyle Stanley, has done exceptionally well recently in green regulation, but no 81%. And his next tournament that Stenson's, and obviously next week, his green regulation is going to be off the charts. So I'm sure he'll rank as one of the top golfers again, regardless. Since I weight recent green regulation so high, but yeah.
Yep, and that'll be sort of where we start and finish next week is what to do with Stenson and Phil and these inflated data points like Colin had mentioned earlier. All right, so let's move to these this last tier, which is going to be DJ and Jason Day, these are the world ranks number 1 and 2 players in the world. They are currently similar favorites. They both have implied odds of about 15% to win the tournament. They're both similar price points. DJ's at 12.5, Jason Day's at 12.3. Yeah, I mean, they're clear top favorites of this tournament. Pete, I'll kick it to you to start. Where are you differentiating yourself on these two?
I mean, I'm on DJ for sure in this spot. I know Day is cheaper, but I'm just going to play DJ until he's not clearly the number 1 guy. He's ranking much higher in my model, even though he's not quite as accurate. They're both really driving distance guys, and I guess accuracy-wise, long-term, Dustin is better even too. But yeah, I'm going DJ, and I'm not going to get off that bandwagon until it's clear. I think Jason Day is a better tournament play, so if I'm going one of them in cash, it's going to be DJ, and I'd probably go Day in tournaments just because I think the ownership will be higher in DJ. But curious Colin's opinion, considering Dustin's now $200 more expensive than Day.
I really can't tell their average projected outcomes apart. I'm basically indifferent to the two. That probably doesn't make for an interesting take or whatever, but when you can't tell them apart, you can't tell them apart. And yeah, there's no reason to elaborate any further on that. They're the same to me.
Their stats are similar too. That's what's crazy.
In every single, they're both distance guys. They're both roughly at the same level. Like both have about the same floor, close to the same ceiling. The
reason I prefer DJ for sure, and I just looking at stats a little bit further here. DJ's been 61.2% accurate in recent form off the tee, and Day's at 45.8%. I also heard some rumblings about Jason Day's back bothering him just a little bit. He has not been accurate, and he's actually been pretty poor in terms of just his green and regulation numbers relatively. Like in recent form, Dustin's hitting 70% of greens, he's hitting 60. The thing that's bailing Day out a bit is his putting. I mean, he's so far and above the number 1 putter so far this year. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, I think he is one of the best putters on tour, and I think he will be up there, but is he this much better than everyone else? Absolutely not. It's kind of the same thing as we saw with Spieth last year. There's definitely some noise, and there's a ton of variance in that stuff like we talked about.
Colin, these price tags are pretty high, though. I mean, 12.5 for DJ, 12.3 for Jason. Are you going to go one of those in cash?
Probably. I mean, I honestly don't know. My cash philosophy is always in flux, depending on exactly this research that I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think I could say. I mean, I definitely play top-heavy guys a lot more than I do in cash. Again, that usually depends on your ability to find essentially value below. And I think between someone like Stanley and Summerhays in the field,
mm-hmm.
Even with someone like Brian Harman, it's easier to squeeze them in for sure. So yeah, I could probably see it.
And I guess it's just sort of I don't know what sort of question this is. It might be a dumb one, Pete. If two guys are pretty similar to you in this specific situation, where they're the same price points, they're just so far ahead of everyone else, would you make 2 cash game lineups and just split your action?
Yeah, I don't think that's awful. I do actually have a lean on DJ this week just based on those things, and even the inclination that someone thinks Day might not be 100%. That means something to me. I mean, it's close. It definitely is close. Just taking a little bit further look in the models here, I do think I have a slight edge to DJ. But yeah, theoretically, if you had 2 guys that weighted the same and they're right next to each other in price, I mean, I have no problem running 2 guys in cash or two lineups in cash where you just go 1 versus 1. I don't think that's bad at all.
Cool. All right. Unless we have any last takes, I guess we can end it there and
pick the winner.
Our picks. Yeah, Colin. Who you got?
Do you want to do the same rule under 9,000?
Okay.
I like that. I think that's more fun.
Okay.
Or we could do one. We could do one of each. We could say we could take a chalk play, like one of the top guys, and we could do someone under like 9,000 or whatever. I guess in this spot it's a little weird because there's only a couple guys at the top.
Yeah, no, there's such few chalk. Let's just keep it to under 9 and make it interesting. Just because I don't think I ever picked him, and I feel like he was on an all early radar, I'm gonna go Grillo.
Damn it, that was my pick.
Yeah. Figured one.
All right, I'll take the other pick that's yours. I'll go Castro.
That's a great pick too.
Yeah.
Dirt McGirt's winning.
Good, excellent third choice. All right, the lines are drawn.
We covered some good ground right there. We got three for under 9K. We just covered a couple, three really good choices, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
Sweet. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. We had a lot of fun last week with the Open, and I think next week we're gonna just roll it right back and do our same thing. We have a ton of content. We'll do a live show, and we'll kill it again. So thanks for listening this week, and come back next week for the PGA Championship. I think it's going to be a good 3 weeks of golf. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you guys later.